liberal view, not the classical liberal view, but the sort of contemporary liberal view on taxes is not really that different in some ways, right? I mean, I know I've heard plenty of campaigns being waged by progressive groups or unions or whoever in society saying that X corporation or X rich person needs to pay their fair share in taxes. And so, what's wrong with that framing about the about rich people paying their fair share?
Well, I think as socialists, we need to be very careful with this perspective because oftentimes we adopt it ourselves when we talk about taxation. But usually liberals try to counter this libertarian view by basically saying something like this, that a person or corporation's ability to pay should determine the amount that they pay. And so this view kind of treats taxes as kind of a necessary evil in our society, that it's something that we need to do because there are other values that are of equal or more importance than the idea of freedom. And in particular, liberals point to the value of fairness, right? That they think it's just fair that there isn't incredibly high levels of inequality, that people that are making exorbitant amount pay some of that. And actually this rings true in some way for a lot of people on the left. We can hear it echoed a little bit in Marx's famous dictum, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. And I think this liberal counter to the libertarian view leads us back into something of a conundrum. Because libertarians are basically able to say, well, why is it that fairness trumps the rights of individuals? Right? Why is it that your value trumps my value?
There are essentially two different kinds of values competing with each other, and you say that fairness is more important than my freedom. I say my freedom is more important than fairness, right?
Exactly. And I think as socialists, we need to sort of take a different perspective on taxation, one that I think more effectively counters both of those perspectives.
This sort of gets into what political scientist and Jacobin contributing editor Corey Robin talks about, reclaiming the politics of freedom, that we should not be ceding that idea of freedom to the right, but we should be claiming it as the left's. It's ours anyway.
Absolutely.
So what you're getting at is that we're not just talking about fairness versus freedom. We're talking about when a rich person has this freedom to hoard as much wealth as they want to, they are actually taking away the freedoms of mass numbers of other people. That their supposed freedom of enrichment means the taking away of freedoms and the erosion of freedoms for mass numbers of people.
Right, absolutely. And I think that, as socialists, when it comes to thinking about taxation and redistribution more broadly, our view is really fundamentally about expanding freedom to people, and also a rejection of this idea or this assumption that's in both the libertarian and liberal view that there's actually something called pre-tax income, that actually people have income that reflects their own hard work.
This is central to the stories that so many CEOs and other rich people tell themselves, and they're sort of central to their political philosophy, right? Is that their wealth that they've accumulated through their corporation is all the result of their own blood, sweat, and tears that they've poured into the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's we've all heard it 1,000 times that somebody has an idea, they go out and they start a company, they build a product, and people buy it because they want it, and that all started with that individual person. But as people on the left, I think we really need to reject this. And I think this is a key first part of kind of like the socialist view of taxation, that actually income generated in capitalism is not the result of individual effort. It's the result of a collective effort, a social effort that's only made possible by a particular set of property relations, and that's supported actually by tax-funded state action. This is kind of absolutely critical to understand. In both the liberal and the libertarian view, income is the result of individual effort and possessed privately before the state intervenes to take a part of it. But this is actually one of the core fantasies that capitalism is founded on. I mean, we know that the capitalist economy is not actually self-regulating. It never has been. It requires state action in a number of ways that are actually absolutely fundamental to keeping it going, and that requires taxes. I mean, you could just think about a couple of examples of this. Think about property rights. Property rights that give people ownership and control over productive resources while others are excluded. These are property laws that are actually enforced through states with taxes. Or think about how the government manages labor markets by providing schooling to make sure that the skill needs of firms are met. Or how the government enforces other laws like antitrust or tort or contract or criminal to ensure that there are stable market interactions, or how the government maintains working infrastructure to make sure that market interactions run smoothly. I mean, even libertarians, or some of them, admit that state control over the money supply and interest rates might be necessary for the economy, for the government to be able to sort of rein the economy in when inflation's increasing, or to sort of encourage growth.
Although they tend to want to use that power in the service of dispossessing unions and working class people broadly. But yes, they believe that they should have that power to do that.
Right. That's been the historical effect. But I mean, my basic point here is that all of this is done with taxes. So the idea that somebody actually has some sort of pre-tax income is really a bookkeeping trick, right? It's not a reflection of the reality. There's simply no income out there without tax-financed state action in the first place. And I think that's a really important first step for people on the left when we're thinking about what taxation is and what our perspective should be on it.
So what you're saying now is that rich people's wealth is only possible. It's only possible for them to accumulate wealth through public investments, through taxation. These past and present tax expenditures that allow them to start accumulating money. I mean, there's also the basic Marxist proposition that what is wealth? How do capitalists get wealthy? But from stealing the surplus value from workers every minute of their life on the job, right?
Right. I mean, to your first point, I think that that state tax finance state action is actually fundamentally critical, and we can actually see all sorts of different ways that corporations benefit from welfare, right? Corporate welfare. I mean, there's about $30 billion spent on farm subsidies, and that's 80% of that is going to major farm corporations, not small mom and pop shops with a dozen, free roaming chickens on their back lot. The state spends about $75 billion a year on other corporations to sort of promote things like energy, different kinds of research and development to different things. So there's a massive amount of state spending to provide a context in which corporations can make profits. But to your second point about exploitation, I think that's absolutely critical, because I think as socialists, the next sort of step in our sort of analysis of what taxes are needs to be the understanding that the income inequality that we see in our society and that has grown in our society is due to the fundamental fact that class is actually relational. This is a really kind of critical point, I think. To boil it down in really simple terms, capitalists are able to accrue massive amounts of income because their workers don't. Or, to state a kind of obvious point, workers make their bosses more than they're paid. And this is really where exploitation comes into our story, right? That because employers have access to productive resources, whether it be a factory or the technologies to make computer chips or the land or whatever the case might be, because they have access to those resources, they're able to hire people. And they're able to hire people precisely because they don't have access to those resources. And all that is actually made possible through tax-financed state action, right? That we have property laws that are actually enforced.
As a brief aside, this is one of our favorite points to make at Jacobin about this relational nature of class. On the night of the Super Bowl, I tweeted from the Jacobin account, Tom Brady is a worker, which, Tom Brady, of course, he makes millions upon millions of dollars. He makes way more than most people do in society, more than the average worker. But he does not own the means of production. He is, however much money he makes, he's making more money than what he gets paid annually for his Patriots overlords. So Tom Brady is exploited.
Right.
LeBron James exploited.
Brady and James unite.
Yeah,
You have nothing to lose
exactly.
but your chains.
Brady has a couple other things he needs to lose. He's got some mental change that he needs to lose
Right.
first. And they could also, I probably wouldn't mind if Brady paid a little more in his annual taxes on his
Yeah,
however
yeah.
many millions that he makes a year. So you mentioned in the beginning, we were talking about the libertarian conception of freedom is essentially like a freedom to steal from workers and takes away people's capacity to achieve any kind of real freedom, any kind of positive freedom. You threw that number out in the beginning about something like $200 billion per year that we would have annually if people were paying even the amount of the percentage of taxes that the 1% paid in the 70s. Just talk a little bit about that idea. I mean, if we had that money, we could fund all kinds of social democratic programs. We could have free higher education. We could have free healthcare in the United States. And I think many people who are listening to this podcast understand that that's a good thing, right? That we have free education and healthcare and all that stuff. But that means that we would have an expansion of freedom for millions of people in this country, right?
Yeah, and that's actually the important third kind of part of the socialist argument, which is that the taxation of the rich and the distribution of that money downward is actually a really critical means of extending freedom, not actually curtailing it as libertarians argue. And it's a very critical means of extending both what are called negative and positive freedoms. This is an idea that goes back to a famous liberal political philosopher Isaiah Berlin, and his basic point was that there are negative freedoms, which are kind of freedom from coercion, freedom from somebody forcing you to do something. But then there are also positive freedoms, which are freedoms to do things, and you need resources for that. Libertarians are all about negative freedoms and being free from coercion. But even on that point, taxes are fundamental, right? Taxes fund all sorts of provisions that offer its citizens freedoms from the private tyranny of firms, for instance. Laws against child labor, laws against the physical and sexual abuse of workers, laws about work and health standards. These are all things that are tax financed. Laws about slavery, like if the state did not enforce laws that were basically not allowing me to own you, we would find that slavery would be a thing.
Pretty messed up that freedom has been taken away from me.
Right, it's a result of coercion.
Yeah.
But so even on those grounds, libertarians, their argument doesn't hold up. What they don't care about at all is positive freedoms, and this is something that socialists should be concerned with as well. And that's the freedom to actually realize your goals, realize your dreams, to live a flourishing life, right? And you need resources to do that. So when we redistribute, when we sort of say that we should sort of tax the rich and sort of move that money into other sectors of society, what we're actually doing is we're giving people the capacity to sort of achieve their goals. Whether that be through education, to develop skills, to sort of go into the kinds of occupations and forms of work that you want to, or just being able to enjoy a vacation somewhere. Resources are needed for these kind of things. They're needed to kind of realize people's goals. And so this is kind of the socialist view, is that actually taxation is fundamentally about freedom. The income that the 1% or the capitalist class, however you want to think about it, has is an income that was kind of generated through the fact that they have property rights to things that allowed them to hire others, and that taking part of that and sort of redistributing it actually creates more capacities for people who don't have those property rights.
All right, Mike. So I haven't quite fully worked out this phrase yet, but I'm going to try this out on you. So we always hear from sort of nationalistic, bellicose right-wingers, freedom isn't free. But they're right? Freedom is not free. And the way that we are going to pay for freedom is by taxing the hell out of rich people so we can expand our freedom.
Taxation equals freedom.
We're going to workshop this a little bit, but I think we should, if nothing else, walk away from this podcast with the reclamation of freedom isn't free.